Under a blanket of stars and a merciless snowfall, the Imperial camp turned into a slaughterhouse in the blink of an eye, amidst the charred corpses and rising smoke. Sir Portugal Arton can't wrap his head around what's happening. The barbarian they had in chains just broke free through sheer brute force, snapping the iron like it was made of plastic. Now, the man stalks through the flames with a bone-chilling calm. In his native tongue, he introduces himself as Urich of the Stone Axe tribe. Portugal, ever the chivalrous knight, tries to appeal to honor. He recites his entire pedigree before the duel, as if this savage gives a damn about titles. Urich just laughs. He likes the name. It'll be a nice entry to add to his kill list before he sends the knight to the afterlife. The knight lunges, putting all his faith in his shield. He figures if he can just draw his sword, the barbarian is as good as dead. But Urich didn't play by the rules. He hurls his own weapon right at the knight's face just to throw him off balance. Portugal freezes, his brain scrambling to recalculate, and in that split second of hesitation, the sky falls on him. Urich doesn't need steel when his arms are like iron beams. What follows is a back alley beatdown delivered with the power of a charging rhino. Portugal is sent flying, his mind reeling as he tries to process the sheer force that just leveled him. The barbarian doesn't let up, pinning him to the dirt and finishing the demolition without so much as a blink. The knight wasn't a bad man. He just had the rotten luck of crossing paths with the wrong opponent. As silence finally settles over the ruined camp, the exhaustion finally catches up to him. Urich collapses into the snow, the world spinning violently around him. As he drifts out of consciousness, a memory surfaces, an old shaman woman swearing up and down that he was destined to be a legendary warrior. Back then, Urich was just an arrogant kid. He figured the old hag was just talking nonsense. Probably drunk on too much of her herbal medicine, she claimed she'd seen him in a nightmare, reborn as a warrior of light. But Urich, with an ego the size of a mountain, just told her it was time to retire and put down the walking stick. Respect clearly wasn't the foundation of their relationship. After ducking a projectile the old woman threw at his head, he walked off laughing, calling her senile. It was their usual dynamic, constant insults backed by total confidence. As he geared up to head out, she warned him that the chief's son would get jealous if he saw Urich recruiting his own men. Urich couldn't care less about tribal politics. He didn't want to be chief, and he certainly didn't want to lead anyone. His only plan in life was to make sure nobody bothered him with orders or responsibilities. He said his goodbyes with a smugness only the tribe's best warrior could pull off and went to meet his hunting party. The guys were already breaking into a cold sweat over Urich's latest plan. They weren't just going into the woods for rabbits. The madman wanted to climb the Sky Mountain range, the place their people considered the border between life and death. The view was incredible, but the rule was simple. Souls pass through, but bodies stay behind. The warriors were convinced that crossing those peaks was a one-way trip to the spirit realm, but Urich knew exactly how to prick their pride. He reminded them that the chief's son had just brought down a giant wolf. They couldn't exactly sit back and look like cowards, could they? He finally won them over with a golden rule. The last one to the top has to carry the kill back down. Nothing motivates a man like the fear of extra manual labor. As they climbed higher, the biting snow and heavy silence made the warriors second-guess their life choices. They stared at the frozen peaks, wondering if they were really trespassing on the path of the dead all because of Urich's whim. Urich couldn't stand the chief's son acting like he was the main attraction. He was willing to drag everyone to the edge of the world just to prove who the real alpha was. Vold, one of his friends, laid it out straight. If the heir actually took power, Urich wouldn't last 2 seconds taking orders from someone who wasn't fit to lace his boots. Urich loathed people who thought they were special just because of their last name, and his friends knew it. That's why they kept prodding him. They'd take a brute who earned his keep with an axe over a successor who only bragged about what he hadn't earned any day. His friends kept insisting, if he hated being told what to do so much, the solution was simple. Become the chief himself. To them, there was no other choice. Urich was a natural leader because of his sheer strength, even if the guy avoided command like it was a death sentence. But the conversation died instantly when Urich sensed a strange movement in the brush. He barely had time to scream, "Get down," before all hell broke loose. A rain of arrows turned the hunt into a massacre in seconds. The barbarians began to fall one by one, completely exposed to the surprise attack. Urich managed to snatch an arrow out of the air that nearly turned him into a pincervant and stared at the tip. It wasn't a crude piece of carved stone. It was pure metal, shining, polished, and crafted with a precision he'd never seen in his life. That's when he realized they weren't fighting some rival tribe. Looking up, he saw a knight clad in steel, signaling his men with terrifying composure. Civilization had found them, and they hadn't come to talk. Arrows rained down like a storm, and there's nowhere left to hide. With the high ground and superior range, the enemy is turning this into a bloodbath from the word go. Urich knows if they don't move now, they're dead men walking. He looks at the wounded, realizing this is on him since climbing the mountain was his idea. He orders Vold to get the others out, while he stays behind to hold the line. The kid tries to play the hero with some talk about brotherhood, but Urich doesn't have time for sentiment. He grabs him by the face and makes it clear. Either he leaves now or Urich will cave his skull in himself. It's the only way to make him listen. Urich knows he can't fight for real with dead weight holding him back, so Vold finally faces reality and drags the survivors away, begging the blonde warrior not to go and get himself killed. Left alone with a grim look on his face, Urich recalls a shaman's prophecy that he'd become a legend. He has no intention of dying today, mostly because he's not about to make a liar out of that old hag. Axes in hand, he begins to scale the cliff like a wild animal. He dodges arrows with an agility that defies a man of his size. He hurls a spear to stake his claim and dives headfirst into the archer's nest to see exactly who's been taking potshots at him. But when he reaches the top, he finds something he didn't bargain for. These people aren't locals. They speak a language that sounds like pure gibberish and wear clothes the barbarian has never seen in his life. These are humans from the other side of the mountains, people his tribe didn't even think existed. Urich can't understand a word they're saying, but he couldn't care less. The moment they touched his people, they were already dead. He prepares to tear through them, but a massive figure emerges from the shadows. It's Sir Portugal, a knight so heavily armored he looks like a walking tank. The knight orders his men to lower their bows. He has other plans. He doesn't want a corpse. He wants to capture this barbarian alive to see what kind of beast he's stumbled upon. Portugal is already imagining the reward the Emperor will give him for such a prize. The man is so arrogant he tosses his shield aside, swearing a savage's axe won't even leave a scratch on his plate armor. Urich can't believe his eyes. The knight even grips his sword by the blade to close the distance and take him alive, but to our barbarian, that's a personal insult. Seeing this man act so high and mighty triggers a rage he can no longer suppress. The knight lunges at him with the full weight of his steel, but Urich isn't just going to stand there and take it. Mid-leap, he whips a hand axe with such insane precision that it leaves the soldiers speechless. The blade wedges itself directly into the visor's slit, millimeters from the eye. Panic sets in as the knight realizes this savage is a better shot than any of his archers. Urich doesn't give him a second to recover. He dodges a sword swing with embarrassing ease and delivers a flying kick that sends the knight crashing to the dirt. The man ends up sprawled out, his pride in tatters. The barbarian moves in to finish the job, but the soldiers react just before he can deliver the killing blow. The fair fight is over. Arrows and ropes fly from every direction to restrain the beast. An arrow bites into Urich's back as they begin to haul him in with lassos like a wild animal. It takes 5 men to choke him into unconsciousness. Nothing settles a warrior down quite like cutting off his air. They drag him through the snow, the blonde warrior barely able to draw a breath in the thin mountain air. The soldiers worry their prize might die on the trek, but even battered and broken, Urich is satisfied. He's just confirmed his suspicions. There is a whole new world waiting beyond the peaks. Bound in the snow as night falls, Urich finally understands why no one from his tribe ever made it across these mountains. The cold is its own kind of monster, but he's more focused on the fact that this new world doesn't forgive mistakes. As the soldiers celebrate around the fire, they look at him as a harmless trophy, barely clinging to life. But something isn't right. The barbarian is laughing while he freezes. The guard lets his guard down for a split second, and Urich waits for the perfect moment of distraction to make his move. Suddenly, the ropes snap and the camp descends into chaos. The trophy has turned back into a predator, and he was just waiting for his turn. Before he slaughters them, Urich has the courtesy to introduce himself, so they'll know in hell that they were ended by a stone axe. With a defiant glare, he lets them know the party is officially over. The barbarian cut loose, leaving the camp looking like a canvas of blood splattered across the snow. Urich didn't leave a single witness behind to go running their mouth. As he catches his breath, he stares at the mountains, knowing there's no turning back now. He's left his home behind to dive headfirst into a world he doesn't understand in the slightest. In a nearby forest, some poor bastard is running like he's seen a ghost, only to end up tripping over his own incompetence. His captors catch up in an instant. Their leader has a hair-trigger temper and is already calling for a knife so he can have some fun taking the kid's fingers off. The boy begging for his life thinks his savior has arrived, though Urich couldn't care less about someone else's drama. Urich appears out of nowhere, and it's blindingly obvious he's not someone you want to cross paths with. But to these lowlifes, he's just another lost foreigner. The leader, suffering from a terminal case of overconfidence, insults him as if he actually stood a chance of surviving the conversation. The barbarian responds in a language that sounds like stones grinding together, and since they can't understand a word, they figure he's just some peasant who's wandered way off the map. The boss gets right in his face to threaten him, asking if he really wants to die this far from home. The guy certainly has a way with words. He managed to convince Urich to kill him in record time. With just enough patience to let the man say his goodbyes, Urich snaps his neck with a move so fast you could barely see it. Max hit the dirt with his eyes rolled back, wondering why the ground was coming at him so quickly. His buddies freeze, screaming psychopath at him, as if they were out here handing out Bibles. Clearly slow learners, they all lunged at him at once, looking for payback. Urich gave them all the same personal attention. He dismantled them in seconds using nothing but his bare hands, proving that his raw, brutal strength defies every rule of combat. The last man standing is so terrified, he's already started praying. He realized far too late that he wasn't fighting a peasant, but a force of nature with no solution. Urich makes him scratch out a map on the ground. He needs to know where civilization is hiding. The survivor, who's one jump scare away from a heart attack, leads him through the hills to save his own skin until they reach a lookout. From there, Ankara comes into view, a massive city built on the back of the copper mines. Urich feels like he's been dropped onto another planet. He can't believe the size of the houses or the sheer number of people walking around without an axe in their hands. By nightfall, they end up in a tavern packed with some very shady characters. The guide tries to make small talk, but Urich is a man of few words, and nobody can make heads or tails of the giant's language. The local drunks have already pegged him as a northern barbarian, mocking the fact that compared to the locals, this guy is built like a two-story building. Urich just listens and tries to keep a low profile. He knows that if they find out he crossed the mountains, things are going to get complicated fast. Suddenly, he sees the guide pull out some metal discs to pay for the ale. Back in his tribe, they traded in leather and dried meat, so seeing a little circle of metal buy food has his brain stalling out. To a man who grew up swapping wolf pelts, the idea of trading shiny bits for booze sounds like straight-up black magic. But what really blows his mind is the hardware. He spots a man with a steel axe and almost weeps with joy at the sight of it. The technology here is light years ahead. The steel shines so bright he'd almost feel bad staining it with blood. He needs an axe like that right now, and he asks the guide how he can get his hands on one. The guide, who has more tricks up his sleeve than a carnival magician and teeth that gave up on life decades ago, realizes he's sitting on a literal gold mine. Urich is a war machine without a cent to his name, the perfect candidate to start turning a profit with his fists. He takes him straight to the fighting pits. The deal is simple, fight for coin, but on one condition, no killing. To Urich, being asked to fight without killing is like being asked to eat soup with a fork. Technically possible, sure, but it feels like a total waste of time. The guide uses hand signals to explain that if he breaks the merchandise, there's no more business. Urich agrees, even if he thinks stepping into a ring without someone ending up in a coffin is the stupidest thing he's ever heard. Inside the arena, it's nothing but noise and gambling. Urich enters the ring with the casual air of a man going to buy a loaf of bread. The local champ is a meathead who thinks he owns the place, but to the barbarian, these guys move with the speed of an asthmatic turtle. Compared to the warriors of his tribe, these gladiators are all show and no substance. One hit is all it takes. The champion is kissing the floorboards with his eyes rolled back. The crowd goes silent before erupting. They can't believe the king of the arena went down in a heartbeat. Urich is disappointed. These civilized men are made of glass. As they declare him the winner, he remembers the night he fought in the snow. Now that was a real warrior, someone prepared to die. He realizes that if he wants a real fight, he'll have to find people who actually measure up. For now, he'll just have to settle for being the new owner of the circus. Evening falls over Ankara, and Urich gets the rudest awakening possible, a face full of screaming. His manager is losing his mind because they owe a fortune at the tavern and can't even get a glass of water on credit anymore. Urich is absolutely wrecked from the booze, but he's got no choice but to shake off the hangover. There's already a crowd outside paying good money to see him bleed. The barbarian stumbles along like a zombie while the guy barks in his ear about debts and coins. Things Urich couldn't care less about if he tried. The arena is electric. They announce him as the undefeated champ, and the stands go wild just seeing him sit down. They have no clue how little he gives a damn about this show. Today's opponent looks more like a butcher than a warrior. Urich doesn't even bother taking a stance. He knows one solid tap will dismantle this guy. He tries to gauge his strength so he doesn't accidentally kill the man, but his body isn't listening to his brain. He throws a dry punch that echoes through the arena like snapping timber. He completely overdid it. The poor bastard hits the dirt with his eyes rolled back, soul leaving his body. Urich just broke his new toy, and the Colosseum falls into a dead silence. His manager has a total meltdown. Killing the competition is bad for business. The arena owner doesn't waste any time either, kicking them both out onto the street right then and there. Back in his room, the barbarian feels like trash. He's frustrated that he can't even control a basic strike anymore, wondering if leaving the mountains just to be the city's official drunk was a mistake. He pulls out the sword he took from the red-haired knight. Staring at the steel, he remembers what it's like to really fight, when your life is actually on the line. For a warrior of his caliber, rest is for when you're 6 feet under. Urich knows it well, and the weight of the blade reminds him who he truly is. He's not the pathetic drunk these civilized people are trying to turn him into. But his manager, Old Metal Teeth, already has another scheme lined up. He knows the barbarian is his personal ATM. He parades him through Ankara, swearing this is the big payday, until they end up at a building that reeks of sweat and shady dealings. It's a private auction. Men with cold eyes stare down from the balconies, sizing him up like prize cattle. It's obvious Urich is no amateur, but since he supposedly doesn't speak the language, the buyers are already looking for ways to lowball the price. Metal Teeth couldn't care less about his warrior's dignity. He just wants to see the numbers go up. To test him, they toss Urich a wooden sword like he's a kid at recess. The opponent they put in front of him thinks he's a master, but he moves with the agility of a brick wall. He bellows to act tough, but Urich dodges him without breaking a sweat. To the barbarian, this is like fighting a tutorial boss. In 2 moves, he disarms the guy and makes him look like a complete amateur. When the guy tries to get aggressive, Urich puts him down for a nap with a single kick. He's sick of these games. The man has been taking heads since he was 5, and these clowns want to test him with sticks? The buyers are mesmerized. The haggling ends at 15 million. Metal Teeth skips away with his bag of gold, convinced he can finally retire. Too bad that in this world gold only buys you a mansion or a fancier tombstone. Meanwhile, Urich doesn't even look at the coins. His eyes are locked on 2 armed guards nearby. Finally, something that looks like a real fight, and not just a chore to buy his boss new clothes. But Urich is done being jerked around. With 1 clean stroke, he slices off his manager Donau's hand. Gold flies through the air, rolling across the floor like worthless scrap. Urich doesn't need the change. He's here to send a message. The man screams as if he's only just realized that playing with fire gets you burned, blood splattering across the hall. Donau trembles on the floor, finally processing that the barbarian doesn't just understand the imperial tongue, he speaks it better than he does. Look at the nerve of the guy, trying to play best friends now that the big man is hovering over him, ready to rip his tongue out. Urich gives him a smile, the kind that tells you there will be no mercy today. 1 last scream and then silence returns. The barbarian stands up like he just finished pruning a tree, leaving his partner sobbing on the ground. Horace, the merchant who thought he ran the show, goes pale. He realizes this kid isn't a gladiator you can keep on a leash. He's a walking natural disaster. The merchant tries to back away before he becomes part of the scenery, stammering that it was all just a big misunderstanding. But Urich isn't done playing. He sits back, gets comfortable, and shuts the man down. Nobody leaves until the barbarian finishes the deal. "Weren't you looking for a gladiator?" Urich asks with a calm that curdles the blood. Horace has a real talent for ignoring bloodstains if the profit margin is high enough. He's already running the numbers to see how much he can squeeze out of the blonde. Half the winnings, plus room and board. It's a solid deal for the merchant, provided he doesn't say anything that costs him his head. Literally, Horace is still baffled by how well the barbarian speaks, but Urich cuts the small talk short. A gladiator is there to break bones, not give speeches. The merchant lets out a laugh. He knows he's either found his ticket to the top or his own death warrant. Welcome to the Horace Company, where the boss lives in terror and the employee is hungry for blood. Urich is just trying to enjoy the sunset when some busybody starts breathing down his neck. The guy suspects he's a northerner looking for his kin and wants to know why he's hanging around the slave pens. Urich doesn't miss a beat, lying through his teeth. He claims his accent is just from living out in the sticks, and that he's got nothing to do with the north. The soldier buys it, explaining that after 10 years of war, pretty much every northerner left alive is wearing chains. That's when Urich spots Sven, a mountain of a man who's managed to survive 3 years as a gladiator. The piece is short-lived when Donovan shows up. He's the company's star attraction, and he struts around like he owns the damn dirt. The blonde prick starts acting superior, telling Urich he reeks of open wounds, and that his kind are only human on the outside. Donovan is convinced he's being intimidating, but Urich doesn't even blink. If anything, he looks like he's about to laugh in the guy's face. Donovan responds with a mock-exaggerated bow, sneering that Imperials are only brave with their tongues because they haven't been cut out yet. He has no idea the kid in front of him is an expert at slitting throats the second someone talks too much. Donovan is left seething as the tension hits a breaking point, but Fat Man Horace starts screaming to break them up. It's not that he cares about their lives, he just doesn't want his investments getting broken before they make him any money. As they walk through the Colosseum halls, the merchant keeps whining about his overhead costs, while the veteran advises the boy to at least wear a helmet and a breastplate for the fight. Urich makes it clear that extra weight just slows him down. He prefers to go light, besides. He knows that to put on a good show, you need to show some attitude. What actually surprises the veteran is the kid's sword. You can tell from a mile away it's top-tier Imperial steel, not some piece of scrap metal. That metal is the best money can buy. The Imperial family has a monopoly on it, and it's 1,000 times harder than common iron. Seeing a weapon like that in the hands of someone who looks like they just crawled out of the woods is bizarre, and the other gladiators start mocking him for it. Donovan, being a jealous prick, insists Urich got scammed and bought a painted piece of tin. He figures a barbarian wouldn't know the difference between real steel and trash. Urich just gives him that smug little grin of his, telling him that if he knew the truth, he'd probably drop dead from pure shock. They step out into the arena and the noise is deafening. These people don't go to war themselves, so they blow off steam watching others kill each other for spare change. As they head toward the center, Sven notices the kid doesn't look like he was born in the Empire and asks where he's really from. Urich tells the veteran to take the guy on the right, but Sven takes offense. He doesn't feel like an old man yet, even if he's seen more battles than the rest of the group combined. The kid just tells him to watch his beard if he doesn't want it flying off along with his head, and squares up against his own opponent. Your typical warrior with a shield and way too much confidence. The guy mocks Urich for fighting half-naked with only a single sword, but Urich has already finished sizing him up. Urich pulls off a massive leap, clearing the guy's shield like it isn't even there. Before the poor bastard can even figure out why he's staring at the ceiling, the boy splits him wide open with one clean, brutal stroke. Turns out heavy armor is very useful, mostly for making your coffin more expensive. While the crowd wonders if the kid is some kind of circus performer, Urich wipes the blood off his blade and keeps moving. On the other side, Sven is busy with his own butchery. Urich tries to lend a hand, but Sven lunges with his axes and shows exactly why he's still alive. He doesn't need fancy technique. He's a tank that only cares about crushing skulls. The veteran makes it clear that it's way too early for some brat to be bailing him out. He finishes his fight in a heartbeat. Once the show is over, he tells Urich that he's about the age his son would have been if he were still alive. The kid stands there processing that while the old man walks away, thinking that for today at least he dodged the grave. Urich can't wrap his head around why someone that tough would live as a slave, but he doesn't have time to get philosophical because the whole arena is erupting, screaming his name. The kid asked for a 2-on-1 and absolutely wiped the floor with him, becoming the crowd's shiny new toy. Horace is already doing the math in his head. He knows he's sitting on a gold mine and he has no intention of letting go. After the matches, the gladiators head out for drinks to take the edge off the adrenaline. The conversation turns to Sven, the giant who'd rather be a slave than a free man. The guy is loyal to a fault. Horace pulled him out of the sea half dead, and for a northern warrior, you pay that debt by staying under his command. Bakman, the only one who seems interested in chatting without starting a fight, asks Urich about the Hill of Swords. It's that warrior's paradise where you spend eternity eating, drinking, and hacking at each other. Never-ending feast where the only rule is you have to die fighting? If you die of old age or the flu, you're a failure and you're barred from the party. Urich listens intently. He remembers what the elders of his tribe said about the afterlife, but now that he's out in the world, he realizes there is no land of souls, just people living their lives. That's when the doubt creeps in. What's going to happen to his soul when he dies? Just your average existential crisis over a beer. Bakman shows him an amulet of Ru, the sun god, where supposedly everyone returns to be reborn. It's the official religion, but the kid's logic is bulletproof. He believes in the entire sky, and since the sun is just one small part of that, his belief is automatically bigger. You can't really argue with that. Bakman bursts out laughing. He's starting to like this savage. He finally introduces himself. It looks like Urich found his first decent person in this nest of vipers, which in this world is about as rare as a gladiator with all his teeth. This guy's logic is on another level. If the MC wants the whole sky just because the sun is a tiny slice of it, then don't settle for just one video. Subscribe to the whole channel. Smash that like button, and let me know in the comments which manhwa you want to see enter the arena next. Catch you later. Bakman steps into the room and nearly ends up with a decorative axe embedded in his skull. Turns out, Urich blew every last coin of Horace's money on new steel. The kid clearly doesn't have a savings account bone in his body. His only interest is figuring out how many people he can cleave in half with his new toys. Bakman breaks out the wine, knowing that if he wants to talk business with this animal, he needs something to take the edge off. They sit down and the mood shifts to dead serious in an instant. Bakman gives him the lowdown on the locker room politics and the man who really runs this circus, Donovan, an ex-soldier who keeps everyone under his thumb. The guy rigs the rosters so his crew gets the easy fights and the big payouts, leaving everyone else to scrap over the leftovers. If you don't settle for the crumbs he tosses you, you starve. Simple as that. Bakman cuts to the chase and asks Urich to be his new heavy hitter. He knows he's not man enough to stand up to Donovan himself, so he's betting the farm on the barbarian. Urich listens with a terrifyingly calm expression, but instead of taking offense at being used, he drops some wilderness wisdom. It's just the way of the world. A fox uses a lion to hunt a wolf. Urich actually likes Bakman. He was the first person who didn't look at him like a freak when he rolled into the city. And since the warrior is the type to repay a kindness, his gratitude nearly brings the poor guy to tears. Meanwhile, Horace is busy doing what he does best, trading in cannon fodder. He's buying up death row inmates to make his star gladiators look good, offering them 10 minutes of fame in the arena, followed by an eternity of rest 6 feet under. The deal is done, but Urich isn't satisfied with just one slave. He decides to double down. The blonde brute marches straight into Horace's office with a special request. He wants to be the main event. Donovan tries to mark his territory by treating him like a nobody, but Urich couldn't care less. He ignores the soldier entirely and tells Horace to put him up against 5 men at once. The barbarian seems to relish being outnumbered, eager to be tested from every possible angle, convinced he can handle whatever they throw at him. Horace nearly has a heart attack. If the kid dies in his first match, the company's reputation goes down the drain. But Donovan, wearing that punchable smirk of his, tells the boss to give the boy what he wants. He's already imagining Urich as a decorative rug, saving him the trouble of getting his own hands dirty later. Urich's ego is through the roof, swearing he's never lost a fight, even against 10 men at a time. He sits there like he owns the place, even thanking Donovan for being so generous. The boss has no choice but to agree, even though he feels like he's losing control of his own office. As the Coliseum begins to fill with a bloodthirsty crowd, Urich spends his time in the locker room telling the others about the ocean and its infinite horizon. The others think he's pulling their leg. To them, the idea of a river with no other side is just a tall tale from a primitive mind. Bakman shows up, a nervous wreck, begging him to call it off because this is a suicide mission. He feels guilty for dragging him into this mess, but the warrior doesn't even flinch. He just stays in his zone, telling Bakman he has no idea what he's truly capable of. To him, civilized people are just cowards who give up before the fight even starts. Bakman tries to give him a cheap history lesson, saying the northern barbarians lost because they were stubborn, while the ones from the south surrendered quickly and now live like kings. He looks at Urich like he's already a dead man walking, watching with disdain as the blonde smears dark pigment across his face. He thinks the war paint is just some savage nonsense, but he clearly has no clue what's about to hit that arena. Urich asks Bakman what he'll do when he wins. The young man promises that if he makes it out alive, he'll follow his every command without question. The barbarian laughs in his face, warning him that keeping up with a man like him isn't for the faint of heart. Urich's expression hardens as he dips his hands into the bowl of pigment. He's faced 5-to-1 odds before, and he has no intention of heading to the afterlife just yet. He understands the risk. He knows today could be his last, but he's not going down without breaking a few skulls first. He marks his forehead with a gaze that could freeze blood. He has a goal and he's damn sure he's going to achieve it. Outside, the crowd is screaming for blood, but in here, the air is heavy. It's that oppressive silence that only comes right before the storm hits. And the giant is finally on his feet. They call his name, and those who were there to mock him suddenly find themselves speechless. Just look at him. He looks like a demon crawled out of a nightmare. With that paint and eyes full of fire, he isn't entering the arena to fight for his life. He's going in to collect a debt. Cold-blooded, the nobleman in the ridiculous hat looks skeptical, clearly worried the show will be a total flop. Horace, who looks like a wine barrel stuffed into an expensive suit, bows low and promises him a night he'll never forget. The man certainly knows how to sell a dream, but his client isn't in the mood for fairy tales today. Donovan watches from the back with smug confidence. To him, Urich is just making noise before being carried out in a body bag. He's certain his bet against the warrior is basically free money. Down in the arena, the tension is thick enough to cut with a knife. Urich enters with his face smeared in red war paint, and the crowd falls silent, wondering if it's pigment or the blood of his last victim. He couldn't care less, casually glancing at the sky and noting that it's a beautiful day for a massacre. His opponents are 5 thugs who look like they were just dug up, though they're armed to the teeth. They've been promised a full pardon if they take down the barbarian, so they're grinning ear to ear, thinking 5-on-1 is just a formality. In the stands, Bakman is on the verge of a panic attack seeing the odds. Sven, however, notices that these men aren't just random brawlers. The way they handle those killing tools screams that they are career criminals. Donovan is practically doubling over with laughter. In his mind, Urich already has one foot in the grave and is just waiting for the final shove. The 5 of them take their positions, but Urich reads their play instantly. They know how to use their weapons, sure, but they haven't the faintest clue how to fight as a unit. They're relying entirely on numbers. They stand there sizing him up, because nobody wants to be the brave first soul to test the edge of his blade. Urich gets tired of waiting. He flashes them a psychopathic grin and makes the first move. He charges straight ahead like a freight train with no brakes, and one of the thugs hunkers down behind his shield, convinced it'll stop the impact. Poor delusional bastard. Urich was itching to test his new gear. He lets loose a swing with such primal force that it shears through wood and bone like they were warm butter. The warrior stands there, drenched in gore, staring at the steel in fascination. The blade doesn't have a single nick. Too bad the criminal can't say the same, seeing as he's been retired in 2 pieces. Urich doesn't give them a second to blink. He lunges at the rest, tearing through them without breaking a sweat. He's in his element, delighted that his new sword carves through their defenses as if they weren't even there. Any other blade would be bent into a boomerang by now, but this masterpiece of imperial steel remains flawless. Up in the stands, Donovan's face is twisting. Seeing a barbarian with such high-end equipment fills him with an envy you can almost smell. Meanwhile, Sven calls it like it is. If these were professional soldiers, it might be a fight, but these are just petty crooks who don't know which way the axes are falling. Urich has them pinned by sheer presence alone. The survivors are shaking. They can already see the light at the end of the tunnel. The kid even takes a moment to taunt them, beckoning them closer, knowing full well they have nowhere to run. With a few quick motions, he gives the client a world-class show and gives his rivals an early retirement. Urich didn't even break a sweat. Honestly, he found it a bit boring to put in so much effort for such pathetic resistance. Horace is practically jumping for joy now that his investment has paid off. But the real shock comes when Urich wipes the blood from his face. It turns out that under all that grime was a young man with remarkably fine features. The transformation is so jarring that the wild man from the caves vanishes, replaced by a kid who looks like he belongs on a pedestal. The entire arena is left speechless. Even Donovan, who wanted to put a knife in his back 10 minutes ago, approaches him now to acknowledge him as the troupe's new star. Urich returns the gesture with a winning smile. He knows that from here on out, he's the one running the show. Urich is dreaming of a land of plenty, where the soil is rich and hunger is nothing but a distant memory, but his peace is cut short before he can even enjoy it. Bakman shakes him awake because break time is over. The boss is itching for blood and needs Urich to help organize this week's slaughter. The barbarian rolls out of bed in a foul mood that definitely doesn't match his pretty boy face. Inside Horace's office, the air is thick with the stench of stale sweat and shady business deals. The fat man, hungrier for gold than for his next meal, has already laid out the schedule. 5 fights, including a match against the nobleman's personal champion. Horace suggests throwing a disposable slave into the mix as a sacrificial lamb. He doesn't want to risk his starfighters in a match he's already written off as a loss. Urich looks at him like he's lost his mind. The concept of losing on purpose is completely alien to him. If you step into that ring, you do it to leave the other guy in a body bag. Bakman just listens to the whole exchange with his usual air of smug superiority. Horace tries to push for a 3-on-3 tag team match for the honor of the company, but the idea makes both men sick. They'd rather get their teeth kicked in than share the spotlight. Since Bakman got his way last time, the barbarian is calling the shots now. Urich smells an opportunity and makes a counter-offer. They'll use only one slave, so the payout is much bigger for them. 2 million a head seems like a fair price for dancing with death against the champion. Horace haggles like he's passing a kidney stone, but they finally settle on 1.8 million provided they take Sven, the veteran giant, with them. Urich agrees without a second thought. As the boss signs the contract, the kid finds himself mesmerized by the ink on the paper. It hits him then. In this civilized world, the man who knows how to read is the one who signs everyone else's death warrant. And if one thing is certain, it's that Urich wasn't born to be the one waiting for the axe to fall. Back in the cells, Bakman and the others stare at Sven in disbelief. They can't wrap their heads around why a man with his physique still accepts being a slave. The giant explains that his master promised him passage to the Hill of Swords, basically warrior heaven, where the only requirement for entry is to die with a blade in your hand. It sounds like a great retirement plan, except for the tiny detail that you have to be a corpse to collect. Urich asks about his family, and the mood turns heavy instantly. Sven lost everything to the Empire. He has no home left to go back to, and no one waiting for him. His clan had a desperate plan to cross the sea in search of a legend. They say that on the other side, there's a land where everyone has black hair and black eyes. Bakman and Urich think it sounds like a drunkard's fairy tale and laugh right in his face. Bakman, who fancies himself a geographer because he grew up near the coast, swears that there's nothing but an abyss at the edge of the water. According to him, if you keep sailing, you just fall off the map. Urich scoffs, claiming the sea can't be that big, and that you could probably swim across it in a couple of days. The other two nearly have a stroke trying to explain that the ocean isn't a swimming pool, but the kid doesn't care what they say. The geography lesson is cut short when the call comes to head to the arena. As they walk through the dark tunnel, Urich can't stop thinking about the supposed end of the world. It's not fear he's feeling, it's pure curiosity. He's decided he isn't going to let himself die today or any day, not until he sees what's beyond that horizon with his own 2 eyes. They step out into the Colosseum, and the roar of the crowd is deafening. Their opponents march in screaming, trying to look intimidating, but they have no idea who they're picking a fight with. Urich steps onto the sand with a massive grin. The world is too big to die in a mud pit, and today, he's going to prove he's still got a long way to go. Urich just split an apple clean in half, right on top of a servant's head. The poor guy looks like he's about to have a heart attack, but the crowd is absolutely losing it, chanting Urich's name. The kid isn't just strong, he's a natural-born showman. Meanwhile, big-bellied Horace is having dinner with Trios, a young noble who looks every bit as insufferable as you'd expect. Naturally, the noble can't stand a common gladiator stealing the spotlight. He starts bragging that his own champion, Moggy, is an axe expert too, and promises a much better show. He's nothing but a loudmouth. Poor Mogdy is visibly terrified. He knows Urich is in a completely different league, and that he's basically being sent to the slaughterhouse. But his boss leans on him right then and there. He asks if Mogdy plans on making him look like a fool in front of everyone. It's simple, hit the mark or lose the job. Urich watches the whole scene from the corner, munching on an apple and laughing his head off. He knows exactly how this is going to end. He remarks that when a noble gives an order, you have to follow it, even if you don't know which end of the axe to hold. At this rate, it'll be a miracle if that servant walks away with his head still attached. And then the inevitable happens. Mogdy throws the axe, misses by a country mile, and the result is an absolute disaster. The other nobles already have Trios' number. They whisper about how he's a useless brat who already ran his father's business into the ground, concluding it's best to keep their distance so they don't get dragged into his pathetic failures. Horace, who has a nose for trouble, senses the atmosphere turning sour and hustles Urich and Bakman out. He tells them to move fast. Staying there is like poking a hungry lion that's already pissed off. He clears them out before the noble can do something even stupider. A while later, they're back at the Colosseum to catch the main event. Donovan is supposed to be up next, but Urich is fixated on the gladiator currently in the arena facing the lions. Just by watching the guy move, Urich knows he's a dead man walking. His left arm is snapped and his leg is fractured. They basically broke him ahead of time so the lions wouldn't have to work too hard for their meal. He was thrown in there just to be eaten alive. As the first beast lunges, the lion tears him apart without breaking a sweat. To Urich, the real monster isn't the beast, it's the butcher charging admission to watch. Meanwhile, the blonde kid is just casually crushing a sausage in the stands. Bakman mentions that Donovan is up now. Apparently, the guy is the most boring fighter in history. He never takes risks and just slowly suffocates his opponents until they quit. Urich gets bored and heads off to find more food. He couldn't care less if Donovan survives or ends up as lion dessert. They head out of the city as the sun begins to set. The big man rides on horseback to save his boots and tries to strike up a conversation with the kid, but Urich shuts him down instantly. He tells Horace to just imagine he fell from the sky and leaves it at that. Horace has been managing gladiators for a decade, and he knows this kid wasn't born to just fight for pocket change. Urich plays it humble, claiming he's just a barbarian, but his mind is clearly working overtime. Suddenly, he drops a bombshell. He likes the area, and he wants to buy some land right here. Horace nearly has a stroke. It's like having a pet tiger that suddenly asks if the property deed is up to code. Since they still have a long way to go before reaching the sea, Urich decides to invest in his future. He asks the big man to teach him how to read and write. Horace, never one to miss an opportunity, asks what's in it for him, and they settle on a fee of 10% of Urich's earnings. It's a solid deal. Lessons start right after dinner. The troupe is winding down under the stars, but Urich isn't in the mood for gambling. He's short on coin and has better things to do than lose the little he's got left. The others laugh in his face when they see the barbarian trying to learn the imperial tongue. Look at the scholar go, they jeer. Urich ignores the taunts and walks away, feeling eyes on him from the darkness. He tries to brush it off as exhaustion, but it's a bad time to ignore his instincts. He tracks down his private tutor, Horace, for the day's lesson. The merchant thinks it's a waste for a warrior to bother with reading, but Urich couldn't care less about his opinion. They sit by the fire and the man scrawls a few letters in the dirt, convinced the kid will spend all night just trying to figure out his own name. But the blonde is a total sponge. In a heartbeat, he memorizes the strokes and carves his name into the earth without a second thought. Horace is speechless. The guy has the memory of an elephant. Fired up, Urich demands words for war: sword, axe, spear. He's convinced he'll master the language in record time, but his piece is about to be cut short. Suddenly, a guard's yawn is cut off by an arrow through the skull. The quiet night is over. It's a midnight ambush, and the camp instantly turns into a living hell. Fire arrows rain down from every direction. Gladiators scramble out of their tents, desperate to grab a shield before they're turned into pincushions. Amidst the chaos, Urich screams at Horace to snap out of it and take cover, but the merchant is paralyzed, unable to believe anyone had the balls to attack them. Urich tries to shield him while waiting for his eyes to adjust to the pitch black, but between the blinding glare of the fire and the thick smoke, he never sees the shot coming from the woods. The arrow tears through Horace's throat, and Urich's friend goes from merchant to a fountain of blood in a split second. He's choking on his own life, and there isn't a doctor in the world who can patch a hole like that. Urich holds him, but instead of feeding him false hope, he's brutally honest. He tells him his time is up, to stop struggling and start praying, because he's already got one foot in the grave. He spins a tale about how his people reincarnate and promises they'll meet again in the next life. A mercy lie to let the man die in peace. All while the barbarian swears to the heavens that not a single attacker will live to see tomorrow's sun. Horace finally stops kicking and goes cold right there in his arms. Urich doesn't waste a second warning. He uses the fresh, warm blood to paint his face. Sparing himself the trouble of finding war paint in the middle of a forest, he grips his axes, preparing for the slaughter, and heads out to collect heads. The civilized gladiator is gone. The barbarian is back. What an insane ending. Everything just went completely off the rails. If the barbarian used blood for his war paint, you guys better use those fingers to turn that like button blue. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the carnage, and drop a comment to let me know which manhwa you want me to cover next. Catch you later.